Hello, everyone. Let's start this presentation by Pascal Petit on macroeconomic policy objectives in developing countries, questioning the impact of a new protectionist turn.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the DOC, Dialogue of Civilization. Very nice name, very nice welcome, very nice reception. Thank you for that. Historic debate. I will start, we have very little time. I will start by explaining a bit this title, because you have heard this morning a lot of things which are reasoning in my approach and with my forward. It's something like questioning the context of the new protectionism. So the impact is also what will follow, in which context do we see this questioning of free trade, where when we come from a recent time, or free trade was the alpha and the omega, the thing which was going to make us all well, develop all together, everyone will benefit. I don't think at all that free trade, I think it's pure ideology, and it was clear this morning in most of the expose, but especially in one of the presidents of this session, Mr. Shrewsbury. What was it exactly? First was the case that we cannot have one model fits all. The specificity of countries came very strongly. And I will really say that as economists, I am an economist, we have to learn to listen to political science and to all the social science to understand what is at stake when we trade between ourselves. For instance, something which did not come so much, I will start. Countries are ready to enter free trade, where they have said that there was a competitive advantage that will distribute the role. But when you look at different sectors, you see that the specificity is always coming. Agriculture, for example, is in a very different position. It has some kind of political dimension in every country, which is going to play, and which has played a large role. It's the same if we take natural resources, mining country. The famous dust disease problem means that if your competitive advantage is in mining industry, it will induce some particular strand. Industry is interesting, but what is a moving dimension in industry, in manufacturing industry? Technological change. And technological change depends on a lot of invisible barrier or channel, that is the same for trade in services. It means that beyond these things like free trade, there is nothing as complex as free trade in a way, because it means that you have to have some kind of compromise with people having all this dimension. And I will say that exchange rate, and I hope it's online with what Carlos Bresser was saying this morning, they are kind of temporary compromise. And you have to understand how every country stands for that. And it is not only it is rather country specific, even in regional union, but it's also something which is phased a long time. The type of exchange, how I know how Brazil is working, or your country, even Germany, evolve a long time. It evolves with the fact that internationalization, even in its invisible aspect, from tourism, exchange in schooling and all that, is evolving. And we know a bit more, and it's true that we know more and more what's going on in other countries, but it does not mean that a free trade arrangement can solve everything. So I suggest to go back to this question, the impact or the context of a new protectionist turn in taking a long-term perspective. And this long-term perspective, again, I refer to what we heard of the big institution of the Washington Consensus, how general rules were driven from an outlier or from the specificity of group. The evil is in the detail. How we went through this phase. And the first one I want to recall, which I will start, I will take a long-term perspective, but I won't come back to the 17th century as you did, Carlos. I will start with the post-World War II. Post-World War II is also very interesting because we enter a phase of internationalization where we have been changing. We understood that technology was important. Second World War, the First World War was also a step in advancing technology. The Second World War, even much more so. So I will put, this is it, I will start with the World War II system appears as more and more unsustainable. And that's clear from all the previous, and even more so since 2008, because there was already some adjustment of this system. An important thing is the existence, the very existence of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is at stake. And one of the first person to mention that is a strong partisan of the WTO. It's Pascal Lamy. Clearly, he has been heading this institution, and when you hear him, he's kind of thinking that we are in a period of change, something has to be adapted, and this is what I would like to put in a context. A major restructuring expecting in a new context. Some may believe that the change can take place within the WTO. I don't. With China, an emerging economy, the need to take a long-term view. Because all these emergence of economy are changing the structure. I want to give some flesh to this world economy, and this has new balancings, and it has new credo also. I like the word of Ulrich Beck, regime of risk. That is to say that in all our societies, we have different views of what risk is and how we deal with risk. And in that present case where we are right now, we are also a big change, challenging risk for our economy are kind of new. So I will go very rapidly because I have the 20 minutes as you all have. It's a challenging exercise. I will go from the golden age rapidly to a new era, starting with the opening of the WTO. Nobody thought, WTO was in the mind, it has been working for a long time, people thought that it would be, but it took time to come to the WTO, and it took no time for it to be kind of blocked. A transition period toward a fully fledged financial capitalism, an ideal of neo-economic liberalism, that petered out in a series of financial crises, culminating with GFC, the global financial crisis. And it's interesting because we started speaking of trade and we end with finance, because finance is really the rapid runner in all this transformation. Back on the international regime of post-World War II. At the time, the global governance didn't mainly rely on any kind of trade arrangement, but a common aspiration to set a development objective, social and economic, for the common man. The quotation that Mr. Chaudhuri did are in fact coming from 1944. The World War had impacted a lot of countries. It showed that it was what had happened was crazy. And for those who don't know, this is where you see all the post-war taking form, taking shape. The strong commitment that have been repeated in the creation of the IMF and FME comes from here. I invite you all to look at this Philadelphia conference organized in a post-war resuming of an international labor conference. So what was left of the United Nations First Organization was revived in Philadelphia. And here you have very strong stand, like was said, full employment, the capacity to live with your wages, etc., etc. Then the world went on into three parts, as you know, the Western part, the communist part, where you are supposed the same commitment were done by the communist regime, and the third world, which evolved in different way. An international system based on fixed exchange rate system, and also the Pax America. It's a strange fixed exchange rate system for the Western world because some adjustment were necessary. Because this guy, they took, I mean, as a matter of fact, the institutions that were accompanying that, they knew that some countries were more prone to inflation than others. Italy, France. So sometimes you had adjustment because we were more used in our practices to some. But it was a fixed exchange rate with some monitored adjustment under the auspices of the big institutions that were mentioned previously, comforted by a series of agreements of the GATT, which was much more trading. It was not obvious to say we want to exchange. You have to say what you do in agriculture, what you do in industry, mining, services, and all that. And these were long and difficult type of agreements. That's why I said that along this period, which is known as the golden years of capitalism, the golden years of Western capitalism at the time, all these agreements on exchange were long, and it was difficult to get to a point where you could have organization of trade, the famous WTO. It took time. It took time. And what did it happen? It happened because the the previous system, which has its rigidity, could not cope with the new balance of power with the US deficit. You know all that. The trust in the gold exchange standard based on the dollar did not work anymore because the third world had evolved, because the producers of oil were acting. I mean, you know what was the oil crisis was also a kind of a break of the rigidity of this system, and the neo-economic liberal took over. But it's interesting to see how you can sell this model, neoliberal economic model, to the population. We are still in democracy. How can you sell that to the population, if only of Europe or others? You can sell this thing because you have these strong arguments of free trade. You will have a consumer surplus. That is to say that the consumer will have the goods for a cheaper price, thanks to trade. So the ideology, there was a big ideological shift that you all know at this period in favor of some kind of free trade monitored by the World Trade Organization that will deliver what we need. It looked, in that perspective, the creation of the World Trade Organization looked like a major achievement at the time, largely unexpected, but facilitated by the demise of the communist alternative, which is a major thing in this kind of acceptation. There was no, under the pressure of existing communism system, it was not so easy to kind of drop full employment with unemployment allowances, or all our welfare system, and to open the way to a consumer surplus, which was rather abstract. So it's still a very important shift that we have to realize, and a shift which was allowed by these big chunks of the second world of communism and the third world of the developing country. So this, so what we have been experiencing recently is the fact that the World Trade Organization, as the center of these neoliberal economies, could not really act as a charter of this common development of the world, for reasons which are diverse, because the cornerstone, the mutual advantage of CETA, but there is this sectoral dimension which remains. Agriculture has always been a kind of difficult thing to deal with. I don't think I have time to give you details. Hola. Okay. Sorry. So I have to step up very rapidly to that. So basically, and you will see it in the paper, WTO could not adjust, very little bit to adjust, because of this very dimension I tell before. One of these big dimensions in one country is the role of the state. Because the role of the state is attached to the specificity of each country. And one of the big problems is China a market economy? Why do we have representatives of the public aid state? In France too, we have representatives of we have a tradition. So it's a very difficult issue to tackle. Okay, poorly equipped, WTO was poorly equipped to meet this challenge. Even this appellate body, that was the new thing. There was a court where you could take your case and say, it's unfair, I should be able to tell that, or these tariffs are unfair and all that. Appellate body, hearing appel, all that. But the thing which has happened, and is very strange, the structural change that occur in the meantime is what? Is that these types of liberalization led to a liberalization of capital flow, and the game has totally changed. The game has totally changed because financial became much more rapidly globalized. The idea of consumer surplus, Ralph Nader and all that went away, and you had new facilities to move finance across border, which mean what? Which mean the growth of global value chain, global division of processes. And at this stage, WTO could not handle the fact that you had all these multinational with cases and all that. It was not something debated between countries saying, let's reduce the tariff on such and such a thing. It was a thing where you had to see where the multinational right of investment was important. It was not going to be changed overnight. Liberalization of capital flows, that's what I tried to explain. Development of global value chain. Those are game changers. The FDI implies exchange of technologies. Part of the catching up of China has been a policy of foreign direct investment and all that. A total game changer and a certain blockage. The Washington Consensus, we have already mentioned that. The Washington Consensus, which was let's go free trade, let's reduce public investigation and all that, was kind of coming too late, could not make this adjustment. Dramatic consequence in America. We already mentioned the fact that in East Asia, they have kept the control, they have been effectively more into this. A structural process of internationalization. The turn of the century, FDI, and merger and acquisition had become an important change in technological abilities, including sources, had taken over, putting the world economy on new trajectory. And the BRICS is on one side, even if, ironically, it's a product of the Goldman Sachs. 1 minute for the most important things. In search of a new charter, and this is where I would like to have at least 20 minutes more to explain that somehow the new charter, what can come as a new charter, will be what is around the climate change debate, all the things that occurred in that respect. I will go towards an environmental charter. And my arguments, strong arguments, and I hope I won't miss them too much, is that developing countries are going to be on many sides in position to put that. First, it is addressing with, it's not the fact that it is in Paris, COP21, because it was acquired before. All countries were taking part. There was not a difference between developed and developing. All countries were taking the burden. And after that, you have a lot of changes which are making sense. First of all, southern countries are on the thread, and there are helping mechanisms. I did not mention, but it will be an introduction maybe to the next debate. The new importance of development banks. They are taking the criteria, following the debate, the NDCs, following exactly the SDGs, the role in giving country to the new charter. 3 years after, the number of people. These sustainable development goals are becoming very important, and more countries are paying attention to the vulnerable population. there will be a stock taking of the result in 2000, but more and more you see signs of a kind of cumulative impact following and writing. No hostility to the charter, as expressed by Trump, can resume all imperialistic tariff war that could be highly detrimental for all economy, especially the developing economy. But also the fact that, and someone already stressed that these threats of environmental change is experienced at a local level. It mobilizes at local level, ensures there will be a push from developing countries, and it's also ensure that Trump cannot be in a top-down position, saying there is nothing like a climate threat or environmental threat. There will be localities, there will be states against this policy. Ask California, ask a lot of states in the US which are more and more exposed to high climate venture like the typhoon and all that. You will see. I'm rushing. Scenario for the decade ahead. The hostility of an hegemonic country like the US can be balanced in a different way. Building up of other hegemonic entities as China is doing with its Belt and Road Initiative, which seems to understand that what can be built up around this thing, to what this construction will take into account is an issue, but China is taking advanced position on this negotiation. Another element that inner factors can counter. Similarly, the imperialist strategy may be led to accommodate SDG, if only. So there can still be a big battle between two hegemonic economies, but certainly part of this battle will still be around this SDG. On the leverage effect of special investment scheme, already you see that there is this famous story of 100 billion every year to help developing countries, but not to help exactly, but to participate in an effort. It's not the old top-down type of aid. It would be much more mobilized at the country level. That's why it's here that the development banks are an important tool in this change, in this whole transformation. And you have a lot of new schemes which are, and interestingly done at the COP23, which are showing to what extent multinationals themselves are embarking in this process. So we really have, but we should not be too naive. The world is still at a crossroad. Either we see the processes of mobilization around this new charter developing, and in the first place with the support of emerging countries. The new attention paid to development is that respect. Ocampo and Griffiths that had a book stressing what these development are going to do, specifying the criteria of development which are meeting the criteria of the charter. Or the world will end up with authoritarian regime, trying to cope with the deterioration of the for their own sake and for gated community. We cannot exclude, I mean, we are not so naive as to exclude the fact that we will end up with authoritarian regime. And one is for to reckon that the extent of extractivity, this is for our Brazilian friend, Bolsonaro and all that. Some countries may go in other logic. It's not an easy way, but clearly we have with that, in these processes, if we understand it, if we can push it, something which is of the same importance as the Philadelphia Charter, and which can take the world out of this very dangerous path. Thank you, and sorry for that.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation of historical importance.